Okie dokie. Hold on, let me. You guys are gonna all get cacao. Pew pew. Okay, where's the EM? Okay, you guys ready? How often do I forgive? Forgiveness is not only difficult to do, but also difficult to understand. Fortunately for us, Jesus tackled the issue of forgiveness head on during his ministry on earth in Matthew 18. As a disciple of Jesus, Peter understood his responsibility to forgive, but he wasn't sure how far to take it. What do you do about a person who hurt you over and over and over? So Peter asked Jesus, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? So Peter wanted to do the right thing, but come on, we all have our limits. Where's the justice in a system where forgiveness is offered at every turn? Next.
But by asking how often, Peter revealed his own misunderstanding of the nature of forgiveness. Like us, Peter assumed that forgiveness is for the benefit of the offender. And like many of us, Peter was willing to stretch a bit to be a nice guy. He was willing to go as many as 7 rounds with the same person over the same issue. But after that, no more. After all, forgiveness has its limits. Everybody knows that.
Okay, so this is a hint to the first person. If you're like, forgiveness is lame, forgiveness is for losers, I'm letting that person off the hook. You have to first understand, forgiveness, yes, it's about the other person, but it's really primarily about you. Okay, and you're gonna see this over and over, and not even in the religious circle, but in like psychology circles everywhere, which is they say forgive, forgive, forgive. Why not really for other person, but for yourself. Okay, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit more. Continuing on.
Jesus responded by telling Peter one of his most intriguing parables. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go.
Okay, so what's the story? There's a boss, and there's all these different lenders that he has, okay, different investors, okay, and he's checking to see, oh, how much did I invest in you? And then now you owe me money. Okay, and this guy owes him how much? 10,000 bags of gold. Later, we're going to talk about what the equivalency of that is. Okay, and we're going to see that that's a tremendous amount. And he basically says, like, I can't pay this back. But the boss says, I'll forgive. Okay, let's continue on.
The thing that makes this parable so helpful is that Jesus talks about the emotionally charged topic of forgiveness in terms that everybody can understand. Simply put, forgiveness is the decision to cancel a debt. This is so simple, so practical, but so easily missed. Let's back up.
Okay, because what is anger? Anger is you owe me something. So what is forgiveness then?
You don't.
It's basically saying you don't owe me anything anymore. That's an easy way to understand something. Okay, let's keep going.
Whenever someone hurts you, there's a sense in which they've taken something from you. A debt is incurred. We touched on this idea in our early discussion of guilt. If somebody gossips about you, it amounts to that person stealing your good reputation then. When an employer fires a worker unjustly, the employer robs the worker of her financial security. If a man is unfaithful to his wife, he robs her of emotional security and perhaps even more.
Okay, so we talked about that last week. Continuing.
Wherever there's hurt, there's a theft. There's an imbalance. This is why we say things like, I'm going to get even with him. In order to achieve justice, a transaction must take place that transfers something back to the victim. It could be an apology, a favor, money, or some other form of restitution. But the tension will remain until the debt is settled.
Okay, so we talked about, again, this is a review from last week. You owe me something, so there's always a, you owe me something, you owe me something, so there's an imbalance in that relationship. Continuing on.
In Jesus' parable, the master is going to settle his debt with his servant by selling the servant, his family, and all his possessions. The servant do the only thing he could. He pleaded for mercy and promised to pay his debt. 10,000 talents was an enormous amount of money, about $3.5 billion. That was beyond his ability to repay. Fortunate for him, his master was a merciful man. The master took pity on his servant and canceled his debt. This is the essence of forgiveness, the decision to cancel the debt.
Right. So the interesting thing is, servant actually says, give me more time. But the problem is, unless literally you're already a millionaire, even throughout lifetime, you can't cover $3.5 billion. So it's basically talking about, like, Jesus' parable is basically like, this debt is not payable in your lifetime. Okay? Okay, so again, what is forgiveness? It is a decision to cancel a debt. Somebody owes you something, you cancel. And this is what we see within the story itself. Okay, so far so good. Let's continue on.
Jesus continued, but when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. Okay.
So again, this guy, he gets forgiven how much? 3.5 billion. Okay, billion dollars. Okay. All the old people are like, ha, ha, ha. Okay, so $3.5 billion. Okay? And then now he goes out and he has his workers. And then one of his workers are like, hey, you owe me money. Okay? And so what does he do? So that guy, same thing. He says, please, I'll pay you back. I don't have money right now. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, Sherman?
Oh, now we find the forgiven servant in the same position his master was in, the place of power. His buddy owes him 100 denarii, about $6,000, a small amount that no doubt his fellow servant could have come up with, given a bit of time. And we would expect this man, whose massive debt had just been forgiven, to extend the same grace to his fellow servant. Instead, he had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. He chose to hold this unfortunate fellow to the original agreement. Worse, he had him thrown in prison until he or a family member could raise the money to pay the debt in full.
Okay, so some of you guys already know this story, but the basic idea is he was forgiven so much money, $3.5 billion. $6,000, which is not a small amount, but still something that actually could be paid back, number one. And number two, if you put him in prison, how is he going to even get that $6,000 to you? It doesn't even make sense. Okay? Then let him go free, and then so he can work for and then get you the money. But again, that's what happens, right? When we hold on to anger, like we sometimes don't even give opportunity for people to even ask, maybe they want to apologize, but you don't even want to take that. Okay? Anyways, so again, we see this story here. He was given grace, but he's like, to you, I'm going to put you in prison. Let's continue on.
When the earlier servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? To which I'm certain everyone listening to the story nodded vigorously and thought, of course he should have had mercy with his fellow servant. Anybody can see that.
Okay, can you read one more?
Continuing, in anger his master turned him over to the jailers until he should pay back all he owed, and rightly so. Anybody that ungrateful deserves to pay his debt.
Okay, so do you guys see what happens? So the top boss hears everything, and he says, dude, I just forgave you $3.5 billion. How are you not going to forgive him $6,000? Okay, so he says, you going to jail. Let's go next.
But the next line, Jesus' closing statement, was a zinger. This was the part of the story nobody expected. Peter was still wondering what any of this had to do with his original question. It was about to become painfully clear. Jesus said, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart.
If the meaning of the parable wasn't clear at the onset, it was certainly clear now. The king in the parable represents God. You good, Dan? Okay, the king in the parable represents God. The servant who had his debt forgiven represents anybody who had his sin or his or her sin debt canceled by God. So the $3.5 billion forgiven is the person, whoever has sinned against God and you've been forgiven by God. Okay? And the second servant is anyone who's holding something against because something they've done to us. These are the people basically who owe us. The people we have a legitimate case against. Okay, so the top boss is God. We are the ones forgiven $3.5 billion. And when we don't forgive, whoever that person is, we're basically putting that person in jail, the $6,000 that they owe us. Okay, that's what Jesus is trying to get at. Zungen, he already read.
So.
You understood what you said.
I got to be honest here. When Jesus says, "This is how my Father will treat each of you," I don't know with absolute certainty what he's referring to, but obviously it's not good. Clearly, this was meant as a stern warning to those who refuse to forgive. Peter had his answer: forgive every time. If you don't, you will pay dearly. To summarize, if we hold out waiting to be paid back for the wrongs done to us, we'll be the ones who pay. If, on the other hand, we cancel the debt owed to us, we will be set free.
Okay. So again, for people who are like, I think forgiveness is like, I don't believe in forgiveness, or I don't have enough courage for forgiveness, then again, for both of you guys, Jesus speaks to you and says, again, if you don't forgive, it's detrimental actually for you. Okay, and we could go into a lot of different reasons. Jesus doesn't go into specifically what that exactly means, but basically, you're going to be in jail. Okay, even though you feel like that person is holding you, that person owes you, you're going to be the one that's in chains in the end. Okay, let's continue on.
From our perspective, we have every right to hold out until we're paid back. From God's perspective, it's possible the most self-destructive thing we can do. Your pain isn't a trophy to show off. It is not a story to tell. It's potentially poison to your soul. To refuse to forgive is to choose to self-destruct.
Yeah. You know, they actually, I thought that was really, really interesting, but later again, we're going to do the anger study, but it actually tells us the reason anger is number one reason for depression. It's really interesting. Most people don't think it's lack of it's because of emotions, right? It's like lack of emotion, that's the depression. But actually, it's anger that actually a lot of people are really depressed. Okay, anyways, we'll talk about that more. But again, the whole concept again is if you refuse to forgive, again, it seems like it's benefiting other people, but again, you're going to realize when you forgive, it's going to actually benefit you. Okay, let's keep going.
The deeper meaning of this parable probably didn't hit Peter until months later, when he found himself staring at Jesus hanging from a Roman cross. If this was the price of his forgiveness, then who was he to withhold forgiveness from another? God's decision to forgive Peter required the death of his son. Peter's decision to forgive others who had offended him would cost him little more than his pride. The same is true.
Bless you. Okay. So again, he probably, remember when he betrayed Jesus? He said, I'll never betray you. I got you. And then he betrays Jesus. He actually sees Jesus on the cross. Again, he is forgiven. Now, again, he has been forgiven $3.5 billion. $6,000 doesn't seem that much. Continuing on.
In the shadow of my heart, forgiveness feels like a decision to reward my enemy. But in the shadow of the cross, forgiveness is merely a gift from one undeserving soul to another. Forgiveness is the gift that ensures my freedom from a prison of bitterness and resentment. When I accept forgiveness, I am set free from the penalty of my sin. When I extend forgiveness, there is a sense in which I am set free from their sin as well.
Oh, I love this paragraph. Okay, so in the shadow of my hurt, if I just think about my hurt, of course, It's never gonna feel good to forgive somebody. But again, if you look from God's point of view, what He has done for you, He has given you a gift, then it's easy to bestow other people gift as well. So again, always forgiveness start from Jesus first. If you just start with, I'm a good person, I'm a big person, it's never gonna happen. Okay, because the hurt is gonna be way too much. So that's why you'll never have the courage to do it yourself. But if you start from Jesus, look at all the stuff you did to Jesus. He forgave you, and you could have the power to forgive others as well. Continuing on.
The kind of forgiveness Paul is talking about doesn't make any sense unless you're a forgiven person. He felt free to command the believers to forgive unconditionally because he was writing to Christians who themselves had experienced the forgiveness of God. Whenever I talk to someone who's hesitant to forgive, invariably it's because this person is evaluating his decision in light of what he has done to him rather than what was done for him.
Yeah. So he's talking about, oh, that guy did this to me, that guy did this to me, or that person did it to me, instead of thinking, oh, what did Jesus do for me? What did Jesus do for me? So think about what Jesus did for me. Then I could forgive that person. Again, much easier said than done, but again, if you look at it from this way, it's really easy. If you look at it this way, it's impossible. Continuing.
You're a Christian, you aren't expected to treat others the way you've been treated by others. You've been called to treat people the way you've been treated by your Father in heaven. You don't forgive because the other person deserves it. You forgive because you've been forgiven.
All right, so again, I've addressed the first two people. Weakness is, forgiveness is benefiting other people. No, it's going to benefit you the most. Okay? Oh, I don't have enough strength. I don't have enough love. That's fine. You don't need it. You need to remember it comes from Jesus first, then you can forgive other people. All right, let's go to part 3. Okay, what is forgiveness? Okay, for this one, I'm going to do it kind of quick. Okay, we have to understand forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. Okay, when I choose to cancel a debt, do I need to feel something? I mean, it's easier if I felt something, but that doesn't mean that you need to necessarily have feelings. Okay, Jesus doesn't say, have feelings for your enemy. Like your enemy. What does it tell us in Matthew? These are different Bible verses, but it tells us what? To love them. But again, we have to remember our study from when we're doing our dating series. What is love? It's not just a feeling, but it's a choice. Okay, so you have to understand that yes, eventually, forgiveness, feeling will come, but that doesn't mean that you rely on feeling. Okay, so even though you have decided to actually forgive them, cancel the debt, okay, that doesn't mean that you won't have feelings. You might have negative feelings for a very long time. Why? Because it was an emotionally very difficult thing. Okay, another example, okay, is if you don't understand that is when Jesus was dying on the cross, again, do you think he was like, oh, I feel so like these people are spitting at me and yelling at me and like they're instigating, they're like, oh, if you're the Son of God, get yourself off the cross. Do you think he's like thinking, oh, like these guys are so cute, I have all these feelings for them? Father, forgive them because they're so cute and they're so lovable. No, probably not. Okay, but he still makes a decision to forgive. Okay, so again, it's not just the feeling. Yes, eventually, the bitterness and anger and these hatred, okay, these things should slowly get away. But for you to say, oh, I haven't forgiven them fully, right? It doesn't work like that. Number 2, again, it's an active decision to forget the debt even when memories surface. This is very important because you might have forgiven them. You might have, I'm not receiving money. Like whatever they owe me, I'm not expecting anything back. But when you see them, there's going to be memories or something's going to trigger and there's going to be memories. But what you have to do is continually remind yourself, I've canceled their debt. I've canceled their debt. Because what happens is you hold on to that you're gonna keep thinking about it, and then you're gonna get more angry, and you're gonna forget that you've forgiven them. So what I do, we're gonna talk about it next week when we actually do our lab, but I'm gonna actually have you guys write it down. So for me too, I actually write down things that I write it down like a contract. This person, I have forgiven them of their debt. Okay, so I look back and I go, oh, I remember. Okay, next one. Number 3, it's wishing them the best and not condone. This is very important. Wishing them the best and not condoning their actions. Okay, because again, some of you guys raised your hand when you talked about you accept their behaviors. No, we cannot accept their behaviors if they're hurting you. Like that's not okay that they're hurting you. Okay, but you wish them the best. Whenever I talk to people who have they have really, really difficult time forgiving people, is I tell them exactly what Jesus says, which is pray for your enemies. Okay, what do we do when we pray? Do we say, God, I pray that person will, I hate that person, so you will send them to hell, or there's a pothole and that they will. You think that, right? I mean, obviously you think that in your mind, but you don't pray that. Does that make sense? Right? When you pray for somebody, what do? You wish them well. So when Jesus says pray for your enemy, he's not saying, right, like wish them bad things, but actually hey, so what I usually tell people is say, God, what they did is not okay. What they did is very hurtful. But God, I pray that you would restore that person, or that person would realize that this is hurting other people, and that this person would stop doing that. Okay? So again, it's not condoning their action. It says in the Bible over and over, when a brother does something against you, go and talk to them. Tell them that they're doing something wrong. Okay? But don't stay there and say you're just a horrible person, but actually pray for them. Did you have a question, or were you just stretching? No. Okay. Any clarification on this? Because I feel like I know a lot of people, especially people like Christians, they have really difficult time with forgiveness. Not because they don't necessarily know that forgiveness is a good thing, but because they're very confused about forgiveness. Okay? So I know I went over this very quickly, but I want you guys to really think about that. Okay? Forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. So if you're just waiting for feeling, okay, I'm just going to wait until I don't feel bitter towards them anymore. Okay? That's going to take time. But you can choose to forgive right now. And the second one, it's to forget the debt even when the memory surfaces. So memory will surface. Okay? It doesn't mean that you will forget about the event. You're just saying, I remember you jacked money from me, or you did this to me, but I don't expect it back. There's two different things. Okay? You don't just say, oh, you did that to me? Oh, I don't remember. No. Okay? Unless you're a very forgetful person. And then 3 is, again, you're praying for them. You're praying, and I would actually say, if you have really hard time forgiving somebody, start with this. Because this is really hard. When you really hate somebody, when you want to do this, but you wish them well, that's going to change your heart. God will change your heart. Okay? It's really hard to spit at somebody that you're wishing well on. Okay? It's really hard. Okay? So that's why, again, Jesus tells us, pray for your enemies. Okay. How much time do we have? I'm just going to tell you guys this just really fast, but next week we're going to go over it in our lab, okay? So let's go over it really quick. So basically, what's the process of forgiveness? Okay, number 1, identify who you're angry with. Okay, forgiveness is more than just a decision to move on with your life and forget the past. We talked about this. Trying to forget a debt isn't the same as canceling it. Okay, just forgetting about the event and canceling, very different things. I recommend that you make a list of the people who mistreated. We're going to do that next week. And taking advantage of you next week. Go back as far as you like, but you guys can start brainstorming. And I'm pretty sure as we were doing this study, you already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go back as far as you like, but don't assume that you've forgiven someone just because you put it behind you. That's very important. Okay, just because it was a long time ago, 10 years ago, I don't even remember. Okay, unless you really feel like you've canceled that debt. Who do you, and these are some of the questions. Who do you hope to never see again? That's a good question. Because you might say, I put it behind me, but I never want to see that person again. Again, then, okay, that tells you there's something there. Who would take revenge on you? What? Who would you take revenge on? Who would you take revenge on if you could do it secretly? There would be a lot of people dead here, or dead in the world, right? If we could do this. Isn't there a movie? Isn't there a movie about that? Like what is that movie? Purge. Like one day, it's like you could, you couldn't kill. A lot of people will be dead if we actually did that. And number 3, who do you desire to see fail? That's a good one. That's a good one. But again, people that you want to take revenge on, right? You want to see them fail, right? All right, number 2. This is very important. Determine what they owe you. And writing it down, this will be, and next week we're going to do this. This will be very, very important because actually, let me read it. This is a step that most of us skip. As a result, we forgive generally, but not specifically. I'll just forgive them, but you don't know. This is where the parable of the ungrateful servant is so helpful. Just as the king forgave a specific amount owed by the servant, so we must determine exactly what is owed to us by those who hurt us. Okay? General forgiveness doesn't heal specific hurts. Okay? And also that's why it's important that you might not necessarily need to do it with like fellow Christians, but when you're repenting, you want to talk about specific sins. Is they're saying, God, just forgive me of all my sins. That's too general. You want to talk to God about the specific thing as well. Okay, so some of the questions you could ask. What do the people on your list owe you? Okay, so write that down. What did they take from you? What would they need to return in order to put things back the way they were? Okay, what would they need to give you then? Apology, money, time, marriage, family, job, reputation. And then you might actually be very shocked for some of you. You might realize, it was just I perceive that they owed me something, but I realized they don't really owe me anything. So you might realize, and that's why it's perceived, right? So you might be angry, but maybe you shouldn't be angry. I'm not saying that that's for every case, but there's some cases like that, where you've been so angry about something, but you realize, I'm expecting maybe I'm expecting something that I have no control over. Or maybe something they haven't promised me. Okay, next. Number 3, cancel the debt. After identifying exactly what was taken, you must cancel the debt. That means deciding that the offending party doesn't owe you anything anymore. Okay, just as Christ canceled your debt at Calvary, so you and I must cancel the debt that other people have incurred because of us. I've heard people who listed what was owed to them and put it on the list in an envelope and burned it, and thus declare their debts canceled. Okay, we're not going to do that next week because we don't want to start a fire. But you could do it at your own house. Okay, number 4. Dismiss the case. Okay, this is very important. And this is what we talked about before too. The final process centers on a daily decision not to reopen your case. It's not just a one-time thing, but it's going to take some time. Okay? What makes this so difficult is that our feelings don't automatically follow our decision to forgive. Besides, forgiving someone doesn't erase our memories. If we could forgive and forget, the whole thing would be much easier, but in most cases, no sooner have we forgiven than something happens to remind us of the offense all over again. And when our memories are triggered, the old feelings come flooding back. And that's normal. Okay? Just don't stay there. Don't just go, you owe me again. Oh, right? You have to remind yourself, no, I've forgiven of that person. Okay, that's part of it. We're emotional beings. One of the 2 things usually happen in this juncture. A, we either take a hold of the offense all over again, crank up imaginary conversation, and reopen our case. That's what I talked about. Or B, we try not to think about it and turn our thoughts elsewhere. Neither response is appropriate and helpful. Okay, when memories of the past flood your mind, go ahead and face them. Allow yourself to remember But instead of reopening the case against your offender, take this opportunity to restate your decision. She doesn't owe me anything anymore. Okay, so don't ignore it. Don't stay in there. Face it and say, that was really bad. But I canceled. Okay. Last one. Don't accept the lie that you haven't really forgiven. Focus on the truth that this debt has been canceled. How do you know? Because you've decided as an act of the will to cancel it. Feelings come, feelings go, but the decision remains. They don't owe you. Your memories are not your enemies. Memories are simply memories. What you do with them will determine their impact. The day will come when you'll be able to respond to your offender in light of where they stand in relationship with Christ rather than in light of how the person treated you. So, very fancy way of saying, again, the whole idea is treat them, not how they treated you, but treat them as how Jesus has treated you. All right, let's go into our review questions and discussion, and then we'll end today. Go.